Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Liu. And as you know, I talk about four different types of freedom, the secret sauce of living an ultimate life, which is not just finances, but you have to have time, location, health, and mental energy and clarity. So today I went on a mission to bring people on the cutting edge, making an impact and influence, and bringing their thoughts and ideas in a podcast format and sharing it with you. So today I have Tilly Storm, and she's a female entrepreneur. So for all the audience out there, female executives looking to make an impact, Tilly is someone to really listen to. And she's going to talk about her business. She's going to talk about sexual health and vitality, building a $1 million business. And this can be a fantastic conversation. So, Tilly, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I know we had connected through Podmatch, which is like the Airbnb for podcast guests and hosts. And tell us more about how you got started and the work that you do with clients. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, I'm a holistic sex, intimacy, and embodiment coach, and I help female millionaires and millionaire wives to have the best sex of their life. So it's a bit of an unconventional career path for sure. Um, yeah, it's very different, and it's definitely nothing that I aspired to be as a little girl growing up.
Yeah. It's quite interesting because, there's so much taboo and there's so much like social conditioning and it's interesting because I have friends and colleagues in like Europe and Asia and it's very open and people are free and it's but here it's very it's repressed. So I think that's part of the issue why we have so many issues here. But so tell us more about how you got started in this business, building a business, and we can delve into what you do.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my business started in the worst of times. Like it was the quintessential shit hit the fan moment. Essentially getting divorced.
Mm.
My house had went into a short sale. Uh, my husband at the time had lost a job from a very tragic event
Mm.
that happened that I don't really share publicly. But yeah, it was a really challenging time in my life, and I was a mom of two, a stepmom of two as well. And when I started, it was like, okay, got to sell the house, got to move to a different city, and do the whole thing. And I had no money to my name whatsoever. And when I started, it was like, okay, I'm at this moment where I either figure out how to make this work because I had been basically a stay-at-home mom at the time,
Uh-huh.
just raising kids. And so I didn't have any income. So it was like, okay, well, I better figure this out and do what I'm here to do, or I'm going to end up living in my parents' bedroom, like spare bedroom. And I'm like, well, that's not an option in my mind. So I guess I better figure it out. So I kind of had a lot of, fire energy, very immediate needs, and knowing like that I could do it. I had gone through sex, love, and relationship coaching training for 2 years prior to this happening. So
Uh-huh.
I knew I had a means of income and I could start this business and I could make it work. So I started a podcast actually. And I did that very intentionally because of the censorship that even back in 2017 was already happening around my line of work.
Uh-huh.
And so glad I did because I've built $1 million business off the back of my podcast without social media, which for most people is crazy to
Yeah.
think that's possible. Yeah, so the first year was rough, as you can imagine, but I ended up doing $77,000 in my first year. And then the second year, pulling in like 150, and then it just going up and up from there. So yeah, it's been quite a ride in the business world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, when you have most of the my podcasts, people, they go through, life's ups and downs and challenges, some of it's, part of life and really when you have something lighting, you have something
Yeah.
to to be blunt, you have, fire on your ass, it makes you wake up and, do something, and, because you're forced to survive. Um, so yeah, so tell us some of the, kind of the challenges, you had to, you said without social media, you had to get clients, and, you be successful. What is it? I know, what was like your secret ingredient, or what can people take out of it to start and create their businesses?
Yeah. Well, at first, I did have social media, but I ended up getting blocked, banned, and deleted 5 times from different platforms. I think I've had 2 Instagram accounts. I think I'm on 3 or 4 Facebooks, and I'm on my second. No, I'm not even on LinkedIn anymore. I've had 2 LinkedIns. The last one I can't even use anymore. So it's yeah, it's like you keep trying, and then it's just they keep closing the door for that opportunity. So right now I still have an Instagram account, which I don't even post on anymore because I just kind of quit trying. But one of the best things that has served my business is really focusing on things that I can actually own, because you don't own
Oh,
your social media.
yeah.
I own my RSS feed for my podcast. I own my email list. So I just doubled down on the podcast and showed up consistently for it every single week.
Uh-huh.
I think there's only a couple of weeks I've missed since November 2017.
Uh-huh.
And just being super consistent and really putting my focus and attention on growing the podcast instead of what everyone else was doing, which was growing their social media. I'm like, well, I know better than this. So, yeah, I love the podcast format, and I'm a huge fan because of, well, first of all, what it's done for my business, but secondly, because you do own your RSS feed, and no one can take that away from you.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, ownership, and, yeah, these days you have to have everything. You kind of have to have this, double down on what you own and control, email list, blog, podcast, and then the rest you just kind of use social media to, don't let social media use you, but you use social media for your outcome and purposes. So, and that's like the key thing I'm getting from everybody is, own your brand and your content, and really, that's how you get ahead. So, you also have this idea where it goes, so especially, not a lot of significant portion of the audience is female. So, in this day and age of Me Too, and empowerment and sexual health as well, what's the process like to help women go from being disconnected from their feminine and pleasure to be, embodied and, fully engaged?
Yeah. Well, a lot of women are in their masculine, especially in being a physician. You are trained to be in your head. You are trained to, base all of your worth and success on how smart you are and the decisions you can make in the last minute, all of that sort of stuff. And I always say that it's the exact conditioning and training that has made you successful in your career or business is actually the conditioning and the training that keeps you from an amazing sexual experience, from feeling really liberated and free in your sexuality, from feeling like you can own your feminine side and be soft and surrendered and yet still so powerful. And I think that there's a lot that we women have to learn about, stepping more into our feminine side, because if we are super successful in business and in life, um, it's definitely not congruent and conducive to having amazing liberated sexual experiences that just make you feel so alive and free and vibrant. That conditioning anyhow. So yeah, I mean, as far as like what we can do to learn to get into that is really actually work on your sexuality. Because being in your feminine is about learning to be soft, to relax, to surrender,
Hmm.
to let go of control. And there's literally no better place to learn how to do that than in exploring your sexuality.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's one book I can't remember. It's talking about this masculine and female polarities, and it's because I do a lot of speaking on the conference circuit, so you meet a lot of, successful female executives, and they're very masculine. They're very like sometimes more masculine than men. So, and it's like, but you have to have this balance and this polarity in your true core and nature. So, and it's interesting, the feminine one thing was like this: you have allow the masculinity to anchor allow the female to be herself, and be free and flowing, the feminine energy. So I'm sure that's what you talk about and discuss with your clients.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you're right. Like that we all have our own inner masculine and inner feminine energies. We have both. If um I'm trained in Tantra and the Taoist practices. So a lot of what I've learned is from the Eastern traditions, but also what we know about sexuality from the Western tradition. So I kind of weave both into what I do with my clients. But definitely the feminine and masculine polarities are so important because so many of us have really outdated ways of showing up in the world, outdated behaviors based on what we were taught about pleasure, sex, intimacy, relationships, orgasm, even from our mothers or the female caregivers.
Mm.
Really diving in and looking at that conditioning and seeing, okay, well, what did I learn from the women in my family about this aspect of my life? Most people tell me nothing, or that, pleasure is just something that's not for you, it's for your partner. Or, this it's something that maybe you get if there's anything left at the end of the day.
Mm.
You have to work to earn it, stuff like that. So we tend to have a lot of conditioning around being in our feminine in the first place.
Hmm.
But your body is designed to experience all of that pleasure. So it's really about just tuning back into that feminine side of you and really taking a look at the stories you've created about what pleasure and sex and intimacy mean for you, and how can we take the outdated stories from our parents or society or religion even, and shift them and change our story to write a new narrative about what pleasure and being a woman even means.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because you brought up, so when you these ideas around femininity, masculinity, sexual ideals, um are they, because I'm westernized, so but do you see a different social culture across Europe and other cultures, or is it, this idea where, sex is shamed and, guilted, and kind of these double standards? Is that just in the West, or is it other cultures?
Oh, a great question. Everyone likes to tell me this. Well, I grew up in so and so, and therefore I have more guilt and shame around my sexuality. Almost like it's a badge of honor. But truthfully, it's no matter where you grew up in the world. I would say there's one small pocket in Northern Europe, like in Sweden and these areas where the cultural conditioning and shaming is not nearly as bad as other areas. They've been known to be sex positive and pleasure positive for a while now,
Mm.
whereas everywhere else is just kind of catching up. So
Mhm.
it doesn't matter if you grew up in Thailand. It doesn't matter if you grew up in New Orleans, where I'm from. It doesn't matter if you grew up in California. Like we still all get these negative stories and negative belief systems about what's even possible for us to experience actually with a person, or just with ourselves, or what our bodies are even capable of,
Mm.
or why it's even important to most women that who are super in their masculine can't even fathom why pleasure is even important.
Mhm. Mm.
And to me, I'm like, you can't really be thriving if you aren't connected to your pleasure. How are you thriving if nothing is pleasurable in your life, or if this is so not a priority for you? It's nothing for you.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's
Interesting.
kind of my take on it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you hit on a lot of core ideas, especially your core, your body, the body doesn't lie. And we all have, like I said, we all have, our our spiritual side. So it's, it could be feminine, masculine, and the intuition kind of guides that. So, it's talking about, from the core. So, the other thing is, I had a question is, can this feminine ideal, can women succeed with these ideals in for sure entrepreneurship, because they're doing their thing, but in the corporate workplace, there's certain standards and certain ideals. How do they reconcile these differences?
Yeah. Well, I find that when a woman really taps into her feminine, most women are scared to do that because they think that that makes them less powerful, or it makes them too soft, or it makes them too emotional, or uh, too erratic, or spontaneous, or chaotic, or whatever it is, or too much. But what I find is actually the opposite. That because if you study the tantric tradition, you learn how the feminine is in service to love, that the feminine heart is all about love. How can I bring more love into the world? How can, we call her the Shakti energy. She's wild, she's chaotic, she's free. This energy is all over the place. It is kind of erratic and crazy, but at the end of the day, she just wants to be loved. The feminine wants to feel and be love. And the masculine is there to support that, to give that a container, to take that erratic, chaotic energy and kind of contain it and say, okay, here's a structure to help you feel safe to explore that. Right. So when I'm working with high level women to really embody this feminine part of themselves, it's helping them to get in touch with their own masculine and also see how they can support themselves to let their guard down a little bit, to let loose a little bit more, that it's actually safe to surrender when you're in touch with your own inner masculine, because you can create that space to hold all of your femininity and recognize that she is powerful. She's like water. Like I think water is one of the best examples of something that's so feminine and so powerful. I mean, look what water does. It creates these huge massive waterfalls and tsunamis and hurricanes and all these things that completely change the landscape. But when we have, like, if you think of a river and we have the banks of the river, that's like the masculine support. And when you're in touch with that and you bring these two forces and energies inside of you and really integrate them and balance them out, then you have like this free flowing river where the water gets to go wherever it wants within its container, and it feels safe to explore that and to be that and to embody that, and it's still powerful.
Yeah, very powerful. How you describe it. And if people wanted to find out more about you, I know you have a podcast, which is interesting. And then and find out more about your work and the work you do with clients, how can they contact you, follow you on social media, etc.?
Yeah, we'll definitely go check out the podcast. It's the Multi-Orgasmic Millionaire. And I have a 5 days to epic sex and pleasure training for high achieving women that you can download at tillystorm.com/5-day training.
Yeah. And yeah, really interesting conversation. I know it's like some people view it as taboo, but it's good to bring awareness, education, kind of demystify it. And so Tilly is on YouTube. She's on Instagram as well. Check out the podcast. All these resources will be in the links and show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming on to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Christopher.